Yeah, please go on.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ali, for that beautiful introduction. So today's talk, as part of the Job Clerk webinar series, will be about the MRCP exam and a bit about internal medicine training. I just want to thank Past Test for sponsoring this webinar. I have received a lot of help from them in the past because of their online resources, and it's been excellent. And I'll talk more about that a bit later into the presentation. So who am I? My name's Jakob. I'm a radiology registrar at University College London, currently ST3 year. Before radiology, I did do IMT, and I did that at Imperial Northwest London Deanery at Imperial College London. So I came up to IMT 3 year before leaving for radiology, and I did complete the full MRCP diploma. And I'll be talking to you about specifically how to tackle the MRCP. It'll just be a brief introduction, to be honest, so we won't be doing question or examples or anything like that, but it'll be just top tips and tricks and resources I use that I think you'll find useful, and a bit about the format of the exam. Before I do that, I just want to make a quick shout out to Job Clerk again. It is an excellent tool that you can use for applying for jobs in the UK. Not only that, it also has a portfolio section which can help build your portfolio for your training applications, which I highly recommend you look at. And when I'm talking about the IMT section, I'll show you that as well. So, MRCP exam, it's a very prestigious exam. It's called the Member of the Royal College of Physicians examination, and it's important for internal medicine, especially when you're applying for higher training. Most of you probably don't know this, or most of you may know this actually. Instead of doing your PLAB exams, you can do the MRCP exam, which will get you full GMC registration. So it's basically, two birds with one stone situation, and you can directly enter, even sort of apply for training schemes as well in the UK if you have MRCP. So it helps with your GMC registrations, it helps with your higher training applications, especially you need the MRCP exam when you're applying for ST3-4 jobs, for example, cardiology, gastroenterology, dermatology, so on. So without that, you can't actually start or even apply for the job. Maybe you can apply, but it's very unlikely that you would be allowed to start without having the MRCP exam. It's also very useful for non-training applications. Those candidates who apply now, especially in this current climate where there's hundreds of people applying for one non-training job, that candidate who has MRCP will probably stand out more compared to others during that cycle. So the format, it consists of 3 parts. The first part and the second part are written papers. They're both 100 questions each, lasting around 3 hours each, and all done on a single day. And that, at least that's how it was when I did it. And then the last part is the thesis section, where it's essentially a clinical examination or OSCE type examination, which I'll go into a bit at the end of the presentation. So each written part is 3 hours. The first exam, or part 1, is more basic sciences. You do have a bit of clinical questions in it, but it's mainly basic sciences. And the second part is more clinical, so you're bound to have things like ECGs, sometimes scan results or CT scans and things like that, and they give you more of a clinical background to the question. And there's no negative marking, so it's very important in the exam to answer all the questions. It's key. Don't leave any question unanswered. So for part 1, part 2, essentially you have minimal background information and only maybe a couple of sentences with regards to the question. It may include things like, present a complaint, past medical history, test results, X-ray results, and so on. Sometimes even the diagnosis and the current treatment plan. And you'll have 5 options to answer, and you pick one option. So it's very important. So essentially you have a 20% chance of fluking or guessing, and you'll be correct. And again, there's no negative marking. But the key thing is you have limited information, and based on that you have to come to the answer. Again, it's not impossible. If you do multiple questions regularly, you're bound to pass, and if you work hard, you're bound to pass. In terms of the subspecialties, or the type of questions or specialty questions that's asked within this exam, almost all specialties are covered. The only one that I don't have here is rheumatology. So for example, for cardiology, you have 14, clinical pharm 15, clinical science 25, even things like psychiatry, so it's very important, 9, pediatrics. So actually, I don't think you have pediatrics. Sorry, you don't have pediatrics, but you have psychiatry, which is 9, which is included. Renal medicine 14, rheumatology, which is in there. I think that's the only one missing out of this group, which is rheumatology. You also get questions on. So it's very important to base your revision on all of these areas, to be honest, because it won't be like, you won't get one area that's much higher than the other area, so it's almost equally balanced. Obviously, you have some areas like ophthalmology, which is less, you can focus less on, but it's important to have a broad or increased breadth of knowledge in all sub-spec areas. So in the way that the questions are asked is there's certain trigger words, and I want to mention this phraseology, trigger words, because it's important when you come to answer the actual question. And a lot of people, the common mistake they have or they make is they don't really understand the question or the question that's being asked. You can get questions where they want the option where it's always that answer. In that case, you only pick the option that's always, without fail, the correct response. If the question says, if it only wants a specific thing but nothing else, then it will be the second option. So look out for the only. And you get questions where, for example, what is a treatment that's never used for X condition? So then in that situation, there isn't a situation where you would do this, but sometimes it does come up. And then any question where, they ask you, they use phraseology usually, and this is the correct response to the majority of situations. You can only understand this when you do questions, to be honest. It's difficult to explain it as it is now, but look for trigger words and read the question carefully, as sometimes the response will change based on the trigger words that's used. So always, only, never, and usually. My top tips is, if you get a question where you're not really sure of the answer, it doesn't really matter. You still have a 20% chance of being correct. You only have 5 options. So take an educated guess. Look at which options are the least, which options are the most likely, least likely, or take a guess where a couple of the options that don't make sense, and choose the most appropriate one that you feel is correct, and you have a 20% chance of being correct. But obviously, don't base the whole paper on that. Study hard and study well, and you study for a long period of time. I actually studied, I think, around 4 or 5 months, to be honest, for part 1, and I mainly use past tests for that, which I'll come on to in a bit. Read the question, then read it again, guys. As I said, it's very important to look for those trigger words when answering the question. And as always, keep calm and flag it on the system that you use for the exam. Before, when I did it, was paper-based, but now I think it's all computer-based, and you can flag questions that you're not aware of that you can come back to. Having said that, each paper you do have 3 hours, but I feel like time passes by quite quick. So do come back to it early on, as you don't want to be in a situation where at the end you've answered but you can't come back to review. So that's part 1 and part 2 in a nutshell, essentially, all both written. I think nowadays you can do it from home as well, or there's centres where you can do it if you're abroad. So you can look at more about that on the MRCP website. If you just Google MRCP, it'll come up. Once you've done part 1 and part 2, the last part to gain the full diploma is the PACES, which is essentially an OSCE or oral or viva section. This has recently changed, and now before it was 5 stations. Again, now it's 5 stations, but they've changed it around a bit. So the first station is communication and respiratory. So communication, it could be any sort of scenario where you're in a difficult situation, and then you have to explain to the patient what's going on, or they're dying, or breaking bad news and something like that. That's communication. Respiratory, again, it's obviously about the respiratory system. So you can get any type of respiratory condition. One thing I would say is, this applies for the other sections as well. Depending on where you do the exam, there's sort of a patient cohort where you're most likely to get that condition. So when I did it, the hospital I was based at, they were specialists in lung transplant, and I actually got lung transplant patient. So it's important to, when you're studying for PACES, have a partner with you going around different hospitals around London if you're in London, or even in the hospital you have, and definitely examine with each other and get a partner to examine with and examine different type of patients. And go, if you can, actually go to these centres, because it'll be a good idea to see different type of patients you're not really exposed to. So that's the first station. Second station is the consultation. Here again, you'll get a scenario. It could be anything, to be honest. For example, subarachnoid hemorrhage, or anything clinical, and then you take a history, basic consultation. I don't need to really go through this, but it's essentially taking a history, coming to a diagnosis, and then speaking to the patient, explaining everything to the patient. And that's basically station 2 and station 5, and it could be anything. I remember I actually had subarachnoid hemorrhage in my one. And then station 3 is cardiac and neurology, so you'll get anything cardiac related. It can even be things like patients who've had transplant, or patients who've had metallic valve implantations, and then you're listening to the chest and trying to figure out what the condition is. And then neurology as well. And then the station 4 again is GI with abdominal, and another communication one. Same thing as station 1, and the station 5 again is the same station 2. You have a different clinical scenario, and you have 20 minutes, and you have 5-minute intervals in between. I think my top tip here with the PACES exam is get a partner, and on an almost regular basis go around seeing patients and examining with each other. That's key, and the specific way you examine is very important. That's what they assess. There are a few courses that I've gone on to, which I'll mention in a second, that really help me fine-tune the way I present, and that makes a big difference, passing or failing this exam. So let's talk a bit about pass rate and costs. So for part 1, for example, the pass rate for UK trainees is around 59.7% for first attempt. For other candidates, so IMGs, 54.9%, so slightly lower. For PACES, it's actually interesting. For PACES, UK graduates pass rate is 63.7%, but IMGs are 42.3%. There's a lot of reasons why, I think, and it also depends on the centre you're in, where you're examining, things like that. But don't let this put you off. The chance of passing is still considerably high. If you're working hard and regularly studying, especially with a partner, there's no reason why you won't pass. For part 1, currently, when I last checked, was around £460 for UK students, and IMG is £616. But if you're in the UK currently, I think you still pay 460 rather than the international cost. Same for part 2. PACES, or the part 3, is quite expensive actually. If you're international, just over £1,200, and for UK, £657. Oh, there's one slide missing, unfortunately. Apologies about that. So essentially, that slide was meant to be about the resources I use, which I'll go through, and I'll just pass this up here. So the biggest resource that I used was pass this, obviously, for part 1 and part 2. Essentially, I did the whole question bank a couple of times, and any questions that I didn't know or didn't have an answer to, I looked it up. Apart from looking up, past test has this really cool thing where on the explanation of the answer, it has an explanation, and it helps you understand better. So it's very, very important to use past testing for part 1 and part 2. There are other question banks out there you're more than welcome to look into, but I think past test is the one that's a lot of people use and recommend, and I would personally recommend past test to you. For the PACES section, the 2 books I used were Cases for PACES. I'll pop a link in the chat box shortly, or maybe I'll ask Ali to do that if that's okay. Cases for PACES, and the Oxford book by Rupa Besant, for the PACES exam. She also has a course where you can go into. It's a full week course, actually. I think 4 or 5 days, where she has all the type of patients that will come up in the exam. And it's in a London hotel somewhere. So I would highly recommend those 2 things, and we'll pop the links in the question and answer box. So in a nutshell, that's essentially MRCP. and paces, and a quick introduction to it. Any questions that doesn't make sense? Feel free to unmute. About the MRCP exam before I go into IMT. Any questions at all in the box? Have a look. No. Okay, perfect. So feel free to ask any questions. Just unmute yourself and ask any questions. I don't mind. So we'll go on to the next section, which is the IMT talk.
Before we move on, can I interrupt with a question?
Yeah, of course.
So as far as I understand, we do not have to be an IMT trainee to take the MRCP exams?
Correct, yeah.
Or the diploma, is that correct?
So it's a full diploma. You do 3 parts and it's a full diploma. You don't have to be a UK trainee or currently in the UK to sit it, or an IMT trainee. But I think if you're an IMT trainee, you get priority to sit the exam. So first seats will probably go to UK trainees or IMT trainees, and then IMGs and so on.
Okay, all right. And another question is, what would be the benefit of getting an MRCP diploma?
So the biggest benefit, if you don't have PLAB exams, is you get full GMC registration. That's number 1. Number 2, if you want to work in a medical specialty or internal medicine specialty in the UK, you have to have it. So there's no way around not having. So it's compulsory essentially, especially to work as a consultant.
Okay.
It's recognized worldwide as well. So it's a prestigious award, diploma. It can help if you go abroad. I know, for example, if you wanted to for example, go to Canada, they do recognize MRCP, for example.
For example, Dr. Yaqub, in your case, how does it help you, or does it help you in any way, since you're in radiology now?
So it actually helped me when I was applying for radiology specialty training. When I was applying, if you had a membership exam like MRCP or MRCS, you got points. So it helped with my application process. But other than that, it actually did help me with my medical knowledge. When I compare myself to people who haven't done MRCP within radiology training, you can see a difference to the people who've done medical training or MRCP. There is a big difference. You have better understanding of the pathologies you're seeing on imaging. So for me personally, that's how it helped me.
Okay. And if it's not too much, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, of course.
So I have gotten into GP training. I will get into GP training in next August. And is it normal for a GP trainee to have an MRCP diploma, or is it advised?
So it won't help you in any way in GP training, in the sense that someone who has a MRCGP and MRCP within the UK doesn't really make a difference. It's not going to add to your training or your job prospects, to be honest. With GP, as long as you have MRCGP, you can find a job anywhere. It will just be maybe abroad, if you wanted to go abroad. It may help, but to be honest, I don't think if you're on GP and you're set for GP, I don't think it makes much of it. Doesn't give you big bonus doing MRCP.
Okay, great, wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So we'll go on to the IMT application now. Or anyone else have any questions? Perfect. Ali, can you let me know if there's any questions in the chat box we can answer as I'm talking?
Yeah, maybe I can ask about the timeline. Yeah, like in terms of what would you advise people to arrange the schedule when preparing for part 1, part 2? Maybe paces might not be very easy to answer, but like multiple question exams. I'm sorry, multiple exam questions. multiple choice question, sorry. And how many times, for example, did you go through a question bank?
So I went through the question bank multiple times, to be honest. And any questions that I got wrong, I read up on it, read the answer on past tests, which was really useful. And it's just, there's no book. Some people say, are there any books for part 1 or part 2? Trust me, there are no books. It's just doing questions and learning from the answers from the questions, to be honest. That's the way I passed. And I did pass first time, but that's because I did so many questions and learned so much from the questions. So there's no reason why you won't pass. In terms of the time span that I used, so part 1 and part 2, I think I used 4 months each, around 4 months each to prepare. And that's with having a job, to be honest, being on call and having a job. If you're jobless currently or not working, you probably can do it in a shorter period of time. Paces took a long time, around 7-8 months to fully learn and be ready for paces, because it's very different. I don't know if you're used to in other countries, but in the UK, you've got this OSCE system where you actually have a real patient you examine. The way you present your examination, it makes a big difference in passing or failing the exam. And you only fine tune that and learn that if you're practicing in the UK, and if you've gone to the course that I mentioned or the books that I've mentioned, if you've read all those, so it'll make a big difference then. But I used around 7-8 months to fully prepare for paces. Also, past tests has a really good paces section, and they have lots of videos. I really benefited from that. And they also have like a mark scheme. So you watch the video, you look at the mark scheme, how the candidate is answered, and that's very useful when you're practicing with your colleague.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
So IMT recruitment. How does IMT recruitment work? So as with any other specialty in the UK, after 2010, they brought about the system where they centralized all subspecialty application process. So you apply to something called a website called Oriel, and different deaneries are responsible based on different specialties. So I think, for example, GP is special. So for radiology, London Deanery is responsible for GP. I think it's KSS or St Heliers or something's responsible, something like that. Maybe wrong, but different deaneries have different specialties where they're responsible for the application process. But you all apply to one system called Oriel, and you fill a basic form out. Now, within the form, we've actually replicated that on Job Clerk. So it's very useful, as I mentioned, to use Job Clerk when preparing your portfolio, your training portfolio. So how IMT works is you do the initial application. On the application, you have these different sections. So postgraduate, additional achievement, presentation, publication, teaching, QI, and leadership. Now, around 90% of the time, other applications, so even neurosurgery or other applications like radiology, you use the same parameters, okay, when assessing an application. So it's very important. So when you're forming your portfolio, you separate it into these subsections. But we've done that already for you on Job Clerk. So you can again use the Job Clerk portfolio to help with that. So, for example, postgraduate, how can you score high in postgraduate? Now, if you have a PhD or an MD, just wanted to warn you, MD doesn't mean medical degree in the UK. MD is a research degree in the UK. So having, Dr. Jakob Kulic, MD, doesn't mean you're a medical doctor. It means you've got a research degree in medicine, essentially. MBBS is essentially in Turkey tıp diploması, or wherever in your country your medical diploma. So just that. So some people get confused on that. I just wanted to clarify. PhD.
Sorry, can I just ask a question just before moving on to the next section?
Yeah.
One of the participants asked, is there a time limit to take the MRCP part 2 after taking the first one, or are they valid as long as we pass them?
I think there is a time limit actually. Please do check on the MRCP website. There is a time limit. I think they're around 5 years from when I last checked. I haven't checked again, but I think around 5. It lasts around 5 years. You have to pass. I think you have to pass all parts, 3 parts in 5 years, or else you have to redo from the beginning.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. So if you have a PhD, that scores you the top points. Yeah, 4 points. Or you have if you have an MD or research degree in medicine, that's 4 points. It doesn't have to be medical, as it says. It can include non-medical related qualification as well. If you've got an extra master's, okay, that can include non-medical master's, that's 3 points. It's good. It has a bit of an explanation here. If you've got any other diploma, for example, diploma, some people here do in hygiene, or diploma of tropical medicine and hygiene, that's 1 point. One thing that you can't use this section for is you can't rank your MRCP score here. That's a separate part of the application. You can't use things like, if you're from Pakistan, FCPS diploma. Don't know exactly what that is, but I'm guessing it's probably a higher training diploma. So this section is any other diploma, even things like PG certs in anything specific you can use, and that'll score you 1 point. But I wouldn't dwell much on this section, to be honest. It's either you have a PhD, you have a master's, or you don't. I wouldn't spend years trying to do a PhD because there's other sections where you can easily score on, which I'll explain now. So that's postgraduate. Additional achievements. So if you're a high achiever during medical school finals, so if you're awarded to no more, which is awarded to no more than the top 18%, you get 3 points. Okay. And just a word of warning, every point makes a massive difference, guys. 1 point can even make a difference of you getting rank number, I don't know, 20. If you're ranked number 50, you can jump like 20, 30 places with 1 point. That's how fierce the competition has become in the UK. So every point does count. So if you're a high achiever during medical school, that scores you 3 points. If you were awarded an international national prize related to medicine, that's 2 points. Or one or more prizes, distinctions, or merits related to parts of the medical course to no more than 20% of your cohort, then that's 1 point. Okay. I think even things like non-medical stuff you can even score here, as long as you specify, or stuff you've done in medical school. Next is the presentation. So if you've given an oral presentation in which you are first or second author in a national or international meeting, that's 7 points. If you have a poster presentation in which you are first or second author in a national or international meeting, that's 5 points. And it's only one, by the way, guys. You don't have to do multiple. If you've got one oral presentation, and that's automatically 7 points, and it goes down like that. So if you have an oral presentation which you were first and second in a regional meeting, that's 5 points, and a local meeting, that's 2 points. A local meeting is essentially a meeting within your hospital. Regional is a meeting within a few hospitals in your deanery, or a deanery essentially. That's how they distinguish both. Moving on, publications. So if you're a first author, or joint first author, or corresponding author in a PubMed cited original publication, that's 8 points. If you're a co-author or more in a PubMed cited original research publication, it's 6 points. It doesn't have to be published, it can be in press as well, which they've included. So it doesn't have to be fully published. As long as you've got your acceptance letter, that's the main thing. But even things like case reports, as long as they're cited, that will get you 3 points. And even non-PubMed cited now, I think, can get you a point as well. So any research you've had, guys, include it. It will make a difference. Teaching. Before actually going to teaching, those of you who are in the UK currently in an NHS job, sometimes some people ask me, how can I get publication? It's really difficult and so on. My biggest tip would be just honestly reach out, go find consultants who are interested in research or doing research. Ask them, can I help with data collection? Can I do anything at all to get on a paper? 99% of the time, they'll be more than welcoming to have you on the team and work for them and help get you, published. So I think it's very important to reach out and don't shy away from reaching out. It's very important. Next section, teaching. And also, sorry to mention, if you've awarded yourself something in, for example, teaching, you can't use it in other sections. So each section is measured differently and pointed differently. So you can't use one qualification in 2 different subsections. That's very important to know. So teaching experience, if you've worked with local tutors to organise a teaching programme for healthcare professionals or medical students on which you regularly taught over a period of 3 months or longer and have feedback, that's 6 points. So how did I personally achieve that? So if you're working again in the UK, what I did was at the hospital I was working during F2, I went to the postgraduate centre or even undergraduate centre, whichever one you have at your hospital. And I said, I want to organise a teaching programme. And they got a group of medical students for me, and I went to them with a plan. And I said, this is the teaching I'm going to do. Every 2 weeks, these are the topics, and these are the people who are going to teach in the program. So I asked consultants and registrars to help with the teaching, apart from myself. And I also got other people. I also got other deaneries involved, where during the teaching, I essentially sent out a team links to other hospitals, and that's what made it into like a national teaching, which I got higher point on. I also collected feedback from my teaching seminars and then uploaded it onto the system to show recruiters that I have formal feedback. That's how you do it, and that's how I got the top marks for that. But if you provide regular teaching for healthcare professionals or medical students as part of a defined program that's already in existence, and you have feedback, that's 3 points. Or if you've done sort of anything simple like bedside teaching and have feedback, then that's 1 point. Training and teaching. So this is if you have an extra diploma, which I did do. I did a PG Cert in Clinical Education at Edinburgh University, and that essentially got me 2 points. If you've got a master's, you can also apply for a master's, it's 3 points. But one word of warning, these are expensive, guys. I did this when I was F1 because I planned ahead quite a bit. But it cost a lot. A PG Cert was around £4,000 or £5,000. It might have gone up. So it's worth seeing if you can get points elsewhere where you don't have to pay. Again, if you've scored yourself a PG Cert diploma here, 2 points, you can't cross-use that in this postgraduate subsection. So if you've used a teaching diploma here, you can't use it here. It has to be a completely different diploma. Quality improvement. Okay, so a lot of people get confused on what quality improvement is. In a nutshell, it's looking at how we run services or how we do a specific thing in the department we're working in, and how we can improve the things that we do in the department in order to improve patient care. That's essentially an audit. What quality improvement is slightly different. Is you define a problem that's happening in your department. You do a basic audit to gather some data to see exactly what's going on. That's the baseline. That's the audit. So you define the problem, and your evidence is the data. Okay. A quality improvement is when you have more than one intervention, so-called PDSA cycles. Plan, do, something, and S. I forgot what S stands for. So multiple intervention cycles or PDSA cycles, where you make an intervention, then you re-audit to see how things are, collect the data, and then present and say, this is how things were being done in our department after my intervention. This is what's being done now, and here is my data to prove it. That's essentially what quality improvement is, and it's when you have more than one cycle, essentially. So if you've been involved in all stages of 2 cycles of a quality improvement, that's 5 points. Okay. Involvement in some stages of 2 cycles of a quality improvement project, or involved in all stages of a single cycle of a quality improvement project, that's 3 points. And involvement in some stages of a single cycle of a quality improvement project, that's only 1 point. Okay. Again, quality improvement projects, every department does it. You can easily get involved if you're in the UK. You can even look at, if you Google, quality improvement project examples, there's a website that you can get hundreds of examples, and you can try and implement it in the home country that you're working at the moment. And say, when you're applying for non-training jobs, you can say, I already have experience of audits and quality improvement projects, and this is my data, and this is my evidence. And then finally, leadership. A lot of people stress about this, but 90% of the time, a lot of people don't have this points in this section, and that's just normal. Either you're a person who's gone out and done a lot of stuff, or you're a person who hasn't, and it doesn't, you know, obviously if you score on it, it's good. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. But the key thing is here, if you've had a national or regional leadership or managerial role for 6 months, then you get the highest points. This can even be anything, you know, you've done in medical school. There's no time limit. So even if you were a committee member of a society during medical school, that will still count. Or even things like charity, you know, sports, creative arts, anything, that will count. If you've held a local leadership or managerial role for 6 months or more, and you can demonstrate that you've made an impact, that's 2 points. Now, this word demonstrate them to make any impact. Again, a lot of people overthink this. All you show here is what during your time, for example, if you were a member of a committee during medical school, you just show what you've achieved essentially whilst you were part of that committee. You don't have to have done it personally. Even if you've done it as a group, that's still fine. It could be small things like, you know, you've improved facilities in the doctor's mess, or you've improved teaching for medical students and so on. It could be anything, to be honest. So I wouldn't dwell much on it. Anything that you can show that, you know, you've made a change will suffice for this section. So that's essentially it for the IMT application. And on the Job Clerk website, which I'll just quickly show you now, we have this My Portfolio section, and again, it's separated similarly. So if you go in and fill in each section, you can add your courses and so on, your prizes, presentations, teaching it, evidence, and everything. You've basically already made your portfolio, and when the time comes, you can just upload everything that's here onto your Oriole application. I hope that helps, guys. So this is just the application score, so scoring part for the IMT. Obviously, after this, once you're shortlisted for the interview's a completely different ball game, and we've already done an interview video on the webinar. So if you look back to our webinars, we've already done that. You can have a watch. You can view that series as well. But we'll also do a specific training interview webinar as well soon, hopefully. I hope that makes sense, guys. Any questions or anything that doesn't make sense, or just anything general you have, more than happy to help answer. Any questions at all, more than happy to help answer. Just unmute if you like, or write in the chat box here. In the meantime, I'm just going to post the book that I was mentioning for PACES. Any questions, Ali, that you can see?
No, I think it was quite comprehensive presentation. Thank you. I just posted the past test discount code for anyone planning to buy the question bank or any other products like preparation books or materials. Yeah, thanks for joining. And if you got questions afterwards, I'll just pop our email address on the chat. So our website, our platform is quite comprehensive to help you with your job applications and your medical career, and we are improving it day by day. So if you would like to have a look, just go to jobclerk.com. I just put the details for our audit course. When Jakub mentioned the audit, even if you are not in the UK right now and you are planning to apply for IMT, yeah, I think it is always important to just optimize your chances, and you can watch the audit course that we have done, which is all about taking you from zero to an audit expert with the template at hand. Yeah, thanks. There is a question.
Yeah, so someone asked, thank you for the presentation. Will it make difference to get MRCP Part 1 only to get F2 stage jobs? So I'm guessing you're referring to non-training jobs. I think having an exam looks better than not having an exam. So even if you have part one, that still stands out, and I think it may give you an advantage compared to a person who doesn't have an exam.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's better to have the full diploma, but if you're applying for F2 jobs, it may mean that you've recently graduated and you haven't had time to do the exam, and employers understand that as well. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it can help. It can make a difference.
Yeah, anything, clinical experience, having extra postgraduate exams, having audits, research publications, these are all very helpful. But yeah, postgraduate exams are quite recognizable in your portfolio and your personal statements.
Yeah. I'm more than happy to answer any training questions as well. If those of you are applying for training, we can give a few more minutes before we end the session.
Yeah, let's give it a minute and see if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, but yeah, job clerk wise, it's a very useful platform to use the AI tools specifically to help assist with your job applications. So definitely have a look at job clerk. I think you'll really like the website. We also have courses that you can use for QIP and audit, as Ali mentioned, and for MRCP specifically, definitely PASS test is something I would highly recommend. Because they're well known in the game and they've been around for quite a long time, and I think it's quite representative to the real exam, and I found it useful personally.
Wonderful. Great. Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah, you can always get in touch with us through our social media or email. And yeah, just make sure you are registered so you can keep in touch with the emails and updates and upcoming webinars. Next week we will do an interview webinar. It will be about F2 standalone applications, but even if you are applying for non-training jobs, it will be quite useful to join. Thanks.
Thanks. Is there a question?
No.
No. Okay.
Cool.
No problem. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.